You're listening to the People Agenda podcast, brought to you by leading HR, workforce and payroll transformation specialist, Lace Partners. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to the latest People Agenda podcast. It's me, Chris, from Lace Partners, and we are doing something slightly different today. We are in a lovely studio, and we're going to be talking a little bit about early careers, because I think this is an interesting topic, and particularly at Lace, we've been spending a lot of time, we've been covered on some news articles in the HR press and national press talking about some of the challenges that young people are having getting into work. And there's lots of talk around the impact that AI is having in the removal of jobs at that entry level. So what I wanted to do today is get a few guests. We've got 3 guests plus myself, 2 lacers and somebody from the Financial Conduct Authority, just to explore some of the challenges that are being faced. So to my furthest away from me is Emma Johnson from our Skills and Talents team. Ems, you all right?
Yes, good, thank you.
Excited to get into the bones of this one?
Very excited. We've been doing a lot of thinking about this, so I'm excited to talk to everyone about it.
Lovely. We have Emily Goodyear from the Financial Conduct Authority, who is, I really hope I get this, Head of Early Careers?
Yes, I manage the early careers team. Yeah.
Lovely. Emily, it's great to have you on.
Lovely to be here.
And last but by no means least, we have an actual early careers person. We're covering all the bases here. It's Talia Pavell from our team. Talia, how are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, feeling good. Happy to represent the early careers.
Yes, the early careers. Let's represent the early careers. I want to start off, I'm probably going to start off with Emily to talk a little bit about from an employer perspective, because you're obviously managing that process. And I'm really keen to talk about the skills side of it, because I think that's one of the biggest topics at the moment. It's how do the people that are just entering into the labour market, how do they develop the skills that can physically find them that job? From an FCA point of view, or from your own experience, can you talk to me a little bit around what are some of the biggest skills gaps that you guys have seen? And then I want to jump into Emma next. So the same question from a Lace perspective, but the clients that we speak to. But Emily, if you can kick us off.
Yeah, so one of the 4 behaviours that we focus on at the FCA is judgement. And I think that is one of the biggest skills gaps that we're seeing in the world of AI, particularly as people come up into their early careers roles. Something around how you execute and critically evaluate the information in front of you and think through how you're making your decisions. So something that AI does in our personal and professional lives, I think, is reduce friction in our decision making. Actually, from a personal perspective, I can ask ChatGPT to generate me a holiday plan and it takes 30 seconds. And it's the same with your professional life. You can put information in and it can generate options and proposals for you. So there's something I think we're seeing in how you critically evaluate the information in front of you, whether it's AI generated or otherwise, make decisions on the basis of that information, but then also be able to articulate how and why you came to the decision. I think that's a big gap that we're seeing. And something that we've been doing at the FCA has been working with our development partner, Grad Consult, on sessions around ambiguity into action to support our grads and apprentices in that development journey so that they can look at different situations, different types of information and make decisions not knowing everything that's in front of them. So I think that would be something for us.
Brilliant. So that's obviously an FCA perspective, but from clients that we speak to, Emma, what are some of those biggest skills gaps?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I agree on the kind of the judgment and the critical thinking part. We've been having really interesting conversations with some of our clients around the balance between generalist and more specialist technical skills, especially in an early careers cohort. So do you bring someone in that has the generalist skills that you're able to deploy around and build a program that, you know, rotates people through different teams? Or do you actually focus on some of those technical skills that you're going to need for the future, maybe industry specific, maybe looking at kind of data modeling, etc., things like that. So we've been having a lot of really interesting conversations about that. I think for me, what I'm noticing is actually organizations thinking quite long term about early careers. So how are they getting people in that are able to grow through the organization into that kind of middle manager layer? So how are we developing more kind of leadership potential? How are we looking at people's ability to build relationships and move around the organization? I think now more than ever, that kind of longevity of kind of someone's career in an organization, building those skills for the future is more and more important.
Yeah, I want to actually flip this and bring you into this, Talia, because obviously that was like the organizational perspective, but from your own experience and when you were in the process of looking at finding your position and joining Lace, was there anything that you looked at from a skills perspective, like, I think I need to be able to do this? That's the first question. And the second question, just linked to that, is Emma's just talked about building those skills that can project you through into that leadership. Is that something that you thought about? Is that something that you really had in your mind when you were thinking, I need to be adopting these types of skills to get a job and then for the progression of my career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the main thing that I was focusing on showcasing was adaptability. And that was throughout my whole recruitment process, not just here at Lace. Because I would say that the pace of change in the working world is so fast at the moment. And the main thing that organisations are looking for is how can they react and redeploy very quickly. So I knew that showcasing that I really had that flexibility would be something that would be quite attractive to employers.
I just want to link you two guys into that as well. So if you're talking to somebody who is in Talia's position, obviously she's at Lace, you can't have Talia. Is that a skill that you'd say that is, if you were to pick a number one skill, is there anything else? Or would you say, no, that adaptability, that agility, that would be the big thing for us?
So I think adaptability and agility, but I would link it to a growth mindset. And by which I mean something that I've observed in our graduate and apprentice population, and the most brilliant ones that we have at the FCA, is the ability to take any opportunity that's put in front of them. So we both did a rotational graduate scheme back a long time ago now. Our scheme at the FCA is rotational as well. And I think being able to look at any opportunity in front of you and see the learning opportunity, see what you're going to get out of it, or even trust that you might not see immediately where that learning is going to come from, but it is going to come from something. I think that adaptability and agility is really important when you couple it with that ability to look up and out at the opportunities being put in front of you. And something I think when I reflect on my own career is the biggest opportunities have come out of nowhere and have come out of things that you wouldn't expect. So the hardest, most rewarding role that I did in my career was through COVID. I wouldn't seek to redo COVID. It wasn't a fun time, but it was the opportunity that gave me the most opportunity to learn in my career. And I think from an early careers perspective, being able to take any opportunity, adapt, be agile and develop in any role is something that really sets people apart.
Yeah. Ems?
Yeah, I think it's really good as well for people that are looking to apply for these types of roles, because actually it's something that you can speak about without necessarily having a lot of experience already. You can talk about being curious and continued learning and your ability to, your desire to want to learn and grow without actually having to rely on past experience necessarily. So it's a really good one for that kind of early careers cohort to think about.
Yeah, I want to talk about how, because the market is so candidate heavy at the moment at the time of talking, and perhaps this isn't so much an early careers thing, but let's link it to early careers, about how you effectively assess skills fairly when you have tools. And this may blend into an AI question, so apologies if it does. We can cover that separately, or we'll bleed them in. But how do you assess tools of lots and lots of early careers graduates coming into the market, and you've got so much access to these tools that are able to speed up the process? How do you fairly assess skills? I'll go to Emily for that one.
It's a really tricky one. You need to have something, I think, that's fair and scalable, consistently applied across the entire pipeline. So we assess potential with our partner Capfinity. They're our assessment partner. So what we're looking for is the strengths that are exhibited through the application process. And that's looking at how someone performs something, how energized they are by it, and how often they use it. And that assessment of potential, I think, is really effective, particularly in the early careers population and at scale, because what we're looking for is the strengths that we think will mean you're well suited to a career in the FCA and within regulation. But we appreciate and understand that you're not necessarily going to come in as the finished article. An awful lot of people who are coming out of education at the moment haven't got lots of work experience. So looking at their potential and where they may end up and how we assess that, I think, is how we approach it. The at scale thing is an increasingly big challenge. Our model of potential is how we do it at the moment, and that works well. But as with all other employers at the moment, the way that early careers application rates are skyrocketing does mean it's increasingly challenging. Last year, we had 100% increase in application volumes for our FCA programs. I think our model works very well, and that assessment of potential is a fair and scalable way of doing it, but volumes are only going in one direction, which is a challenge.
Yeah, is that what you're seeing with other clients as well? I'm assuming the answer is yes, but if you can expand on that.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. There was a stat that I think for every kind of role, you're getting kind of 150, 200 applicants. And I think we can use AI and automation to start sifting through. And I know organizations are increasingly looking to do that, but there is definitely something for that early careers cohort where you do need to look a little bit more intelligently maybe at those indicators that aren't necessarily so obvious from reading someone's CV or reading someone's past experience, because they might not have that. I know when I went through the graduate recruitment, we did all kinds of things, assessment centers, virtual e-tray exercises. Like there are some really inventive ways that you can assess someone's ability to problem solve and manage difficult situations. So I think there's definitely a balance between using the AI and trying to get through big volumes while still really maintaining that human touch. That's what we would always advise to our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. The experience that is on the other end from a candidate perspective is just as important. And actually, I want to ask you about that because, again, let's flip it into, okay, you're somebody that is entering into the workforce and you need to stand out and there's 100% increase in applications. How do you stand out? Is there any sort of bits of advice or anything that you would like to talk about, Talia, from your point of view as to any sort of advice that you have or any things that you did differently that made you stand out, do you think?
I would say definitely, I guess, similar to Emma's point, is focusing on your human aspects, because in the world of AI, there's so many aspects of the traditional early careers role that have been taken over by automation. I think I saw a stat that said 60 to 70% traditional early careers remit is now able to be automated. So with that in mind, it's really showing that you still do have those verbal communication skills, you're able to build relationships, and you can contribute in that sort of way rather than just doing the traditional, more mundane tasks that were associated with it.
Yeah. Is that something that you guys at the FCA are looking at in terms of the impact of the types of roles that we need to fill at the moment and the impact that it's having on AI, and almost educating those people at that early stage as to your role is shifting and what's the impact that AI is having from the new skills perspective of those people that do eventually get onto the early careers for you guys?
Yeah, so for us, I think a lot of it is coming down to coaching support and how we're supporting them in their role. I think what we're seeing is these roles are now faster to judgment. So you're going to need to display that curiosity and that critical thinking at an earlier stage. And what we need to do as managers, as early careers professionals, and as organizations is give people the opportunity to coach them through that decision making, articulate how and why we would get to a different outcome if we would get to a different outcome, but also provide safe spaces for people to get it wrong, I think is the biggest thing. Where we are moving towards that judgment-based activity at an earlier stage in careers, we have to understand that is a big leap and it is a more accelerated development curve than we maybe would have seen even 4 years ago. So I think for us, it's around how do we support that decision making, give our graduates and our apprentices the support, the coaching, the development that they need, but also give them a safe environment in which to experiment, because I think you learn through experimentation quite a lot when it comes to judgment and critical thinking. We want them to be curious, we want them to ask lots of questions, and we've got to create safe spaces where they can do that.
Yeah. From a LACE client perspective, how are we advising our clients on the rapid rate of the change that's happening? I really like the point that Talia made about how 60, 70% of the role, which as it was a year ago, is changed. So what are we saying to our clients that are having to tackle or face this situation?
Yeah, I think the danger that people are slipping into maybe is thinking that actually these roles can just be completely replaced. But to Talia's point, actually, there is still a human element that needs to go alongside them. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on trying to carve out what are those human skills that are mirroring the AI skills as well. How do people work alongside it? It's a different skill set for an early careers or an entry level job than we would have had before. As I say, the danger is that you think that you can just take those roles out completely. And that's something that we are really trying to advise against, because it risks a few things. It risks, obviously, if your AI capabilities aren't ready to not have a human involved, then actually some of your processes might be affected. But more so than that, if you're thinking about a talent pipeline and a skills pipeline, how are you then bringing people in at that grassroots level to develop them up into that kind of middle layer where you will need people who have the kind of judgment, critical thinking, etc. type skills. So our conversations are definitely focused at the moment around what are the skills that you need in the future in an AI integrated workforce. Let's start from there. And then we can start to think about how that actually means you need to design roles and work
differently. And actually, I will stick with you and then go to Emily and then Talia, if you've got anything you want to build on that, because obviously the FCA works in a highly regulated environment. What I'm interested in is how do those early career programs change? Because you're talking about the different ways in which you approach things like the roles, the way in which work is done. How much do you, like from what we've seen, how different does industry sector impact like the way in which early skills careers programs are evolving and developed?
If you look at something like the FCA, where there's obviously a lot of legislation, like regulatory compliance, it's an additional skill set that you need people to build. I think generally organizations are able to carve out we know what the human skills are that we need in the future. Most people are going through an automation journey. Most people are needing to make efficiencies and do more with less. So there are general skill sets that you can build into early career programs. I think where the difference is then if you have a particularly like regulatory environment, or if you are in a kind of specialist technical industry, there might be a need for a kind of another layer of either different types of early careers roles, or maybe it's an additional step in a rotation of a program where you might learn some technical skills, some engineering skills, or something like that. We are looking at kind of clients, industries, and doing a bit more of a bespoke view of what are the skills you actually do need to build. But I think there is definitely a warning about how fast things are changing and how much do you invest in an early careers program in a very particular technical area, because in 3 to 5 years' time, you might not need that anymore. So it's definitely a balance.
And how fast are things changing?
Fast. We have actually recently redesigned our graduate programme with this in mind and been thinking very carefully about that question of breadth and depth with a view that things are changing very rapidly. So where historically you might have generalist and specialist programmes, that is something that we've been considering very carefully, and we've ended up with a model which is more broadly rotational than what we currently have. So we've always had a broadly rotational programme, but the new model that we're working with allows people to move across more areas of regulation and experience more different areas of the organisation, with the kind of explicit idea that they will be able to move into a variety of different roles over the course of their career as things change rapidly. We have, because we're regulation, there are some highly specialist areas that we will retain. So we've retained our economics program. We're continuing with data science, machine learning as different types of programs that we're offering. But our biggest scheme for September is our regulatory program, where people could move across 3-4 different areas of the regulatory life cycle, from authorization, supervision, enforcement. And then when they roll off, they've got a really broad technical understanding of how regulation works in financial services. And we've done that with real intent to make sure that in this fast-paced environment and things are changing extremely quickly, we're building that bench strength of skills from our early careers population.
And it's good from a kind of organizational perspective to build that breadth, but it's also quite attractive to people looking to apply, actually, to say you will come out of this program and you will have a much broader skill set than others potentially. So it's good in terms of employer value proposition and attraction.
And we've been really, again, intentional with the people who are on program currently to make sure we can give them as much of that breadth and opportunity as we can. So just because they applied to something that was called something slightly different, we want to make sure that we're being reactive and responding to the changing nature of the workplace. So giving that breadth of opportunity, giving people different experiences has been something we've been really focused on.
Yeah, and it's really important for that as you get that grounding. And we were talking earlier about that step up to leadership. If you have that more rounded kind of overlook on a business and you've tried different things, you've been part of different processes, then it has a good knock-on effect in terms of your own employability, your own ability to stand out. So we're coming towards the end. We've got a couple of minutes left of the pod. Talia, I wanted to ask you this as somebody obviously who stood out clearly in the actual process of joining Lace Partners, but actually now that you're within the business, how can early talent make an impact within an organisation once you're in there? You've done the hard part, but now you're in and it's about the career trajectory. And we've talked about things that you can do, be involved in different parts of a business. And there are programs like the FCA have that enable you to do that. But is there any thoughts that you have around standing out that you just want to share?
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like, again, to your point, Emily, it really is about building that skills portfolio, and it's building that breadth, but also still maintaining the ability to get real depth at the same time where you need it. And I think there are some skills which are more traditional, let's say, but they are still very much relevant now. I know we're talking a lot about what's changing, but it doesn't negate a lot of the skills that still are valuable. Things like critical thinking, I think that is more valuable now than ever, especially in an AI-enabled world. You need to be using your judgment. And there's a lot of other skills that are now coming to the forefront as critical generalist skills, which didn't actually exist before, like things like using ethical AI. I think that's a massive thing that's suddenly has been added. And if you can show that you have a good grasp of those skills, you really will stand out.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm actually going to ask both of you guys that question as well. What's your advice to standing out once you're within the organisation?
At the risk of repeating myself, I do think it's that ability to see the opportunity in anything that comes your way. So there is a huge opportunity in working in such a rapidly changing environment. It means projects will come up that you never could have envisaged. And literally the first day of our graduate programme was the day after the Brexit vote. And since then, the number of things that have happened over the course of our careers have been all of them once in a generation, except we've lived through quite a few. So none of them were actually once in a generation. So I do think for me, there's asking questions, curiosity, critical thinking are hugely important. Relationship building is really important, but I genuinely think being able to see the opportunity and grasp anything in front of you is what sets people apart.
Yeah, it goes back to Talia's point about that agility and adaptability, and being able to take on that stuff. And Emma, just as a final thought.
You've stolen my answer in terms of asking questions, but it's okay.
You're like, I'll never invite you on the pod again.
I think also you should ask questions, but I also think that there's something in people want to help you and support you, and they want to work with you. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I suppose it builds on what you said, Em, about take opportunities, ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Get involved in as much as you can. But yeah, I think also see the value that you bring to the organisation, being potentially a different generation, someone that's much more used to working with tech. There's actually skills and things that you can bring to an organisation that some people might not have, actually. So you are learning from people and you should do that. But you also have a lot to give and you can help other people to learn as well.
Yeah.
That was quite empowering.
Yeah. I know.
Really inspirational way to
came out, really.
Yeah. And what a lovely way to end the podcast as well, with that inspirational kind of soapbox moment there from Emma, from our team. Guys, it's been really good chatting with you today. I've really enjoyed digging into some of this early career, some of the challenges, because there are challenges that are being faced at the moment by lots of people entering into the workforce. And it's such a difficult, such a fast-paced moving environment, as we've talked about. But it's been really good having you on. Thank you very much, Talia.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you.
And last but not least, thank you very much, Em.
Thank you.
Hopefully you've enjoyed this pod as much as we have enjoyed recording it. If you have any questions for the guys, what we'll do is we'll put their LinkedIn details in the show notes. So feel free to reach out, connect. But from myself, from Talia, from Emily, and from Emma, thank you very much for watching, listening to this People Agenda podcast. And hopefully we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.